by those who are the seed of Abraham, like Midian, but they deny the covenant. Because they deny the covenant, they are not yet really part of the covenant. They are and they aren't. This is one of those areas where, you can't say that because they are Christian or they're Midianite or they're Gentile that they're not the seed of Abraham. It's that they don't see themselves as part of the covenant. Midian was probably circumcised. I would just, I'd bet just about anything I had that Midian was circumcised, and he was part of that covenant. But what did he do? He went off in his own direction and formed his own priesthood. So that means that there is some denial of that covenant, of aligning with Isaac. There is a denial of the thing that God says you have to do, which is align yourself with Isaac, which means you are in full covenant with the Abrahamic covenant, and you don't have a problem with it like Zipporah did. So father-in-law represents mistaken doctrine about the Abrahamic covenant. It does not represent mistaken relationship with Abraham. Now, notice what was happening in verse 12. Aaron and all of the elders of Israel came to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. What were they doing? They're having the covenant meal. They are doing what should have been done by Midian all along, getting in line with the covenant. So they're sitting down to a meal, and it's at this point that they get grafted into the line of Isaac. Now, Jethro was acquainted with all forms of idolatry. He was into the worship of all those natural things. So now he is grafted in to the covenant, and he is at Mount Sinai getting ready to be given the Torah. So what does Jethro represent? Well, he represents the embodiment of anti-Torah philosophy and pagan or New Age spiritualism, which is going to be gotten rid of at the covenant meal and then at the giving of the Torah. Okay, now verse 13. The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw what he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from the morning till the evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Here is another hint to us in verse 16 that the Hebrew people were already aware of the Torah, God's laws. Humanity, as I have said many times, has had the Torah with it from the time of Adam. The purpose for the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai are twofold. First of all, it was a marriage. It was God telling his bride what was required of her if she was going to live in his house. These are the rules. And it was the talk that a man and a woman have when the home is about to be set up. In an ideal, biblically and scripturally based world, the man tells the woman what the rules are, and he also gives her promises, to take care of her and things like that. That's what the Torah was. It was their marriage contract, their marriage covenant. Furthermore, this was the first time in history that the Torah was being written down. So it served those two purposes. The marriage covenant was written down. That's what it means. The marriage covenant was written down. The writing down was for the purpose of putting that marriage contract, that marriage covenant into place. Otherwise, if there was no marriage, they could have just continued with it orally. So in verse 19, Yitro continues. He says, "Now obey my voice, I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do." Here again, we're getting some more understanding about Yitro, the house of Israel. We can see here that they do know that there are statutes and laws. They really do understand that the Torah must be followed. But like all idolaters, they refuse to let go of their other gods. You see, the house of Israel has this propensity to believe that they can have both. They can have Jehovah or Yahweh, and they can have their other gods. I tell you right now, just ain't so. Continuing in verse 21, "Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God and who are trustworthy and hate a bribe. And place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens." You know, in Shoftim, we learn about having people who hate a bribe. Do you not think that Yitro understood the Torah? Of course he did. Did he follow it? No. But it was good advice, and Moses decided to obey Yitro's advice. Now let's turn to chapter 19. I'm going to tell you that there is a debate going on today that has been going on for thousands of years, and that debate has to do with who did God address at Mount Sinai. All of the people, including the men, women, and children, or only the men? This is an important issue because there are some Jews and Messianics who believe that women are excluded from some or all of the commandments. Let's start reading in verse 1. "In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim, and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel." That word people there is bane, and we pronounce it ben, but anyway, it's the same word as is translated children and is translated son. First usage in Scripture translates it as son. But this verse says that you will say to the house of Jacob. That's everybody. Everybody that's in the house. You don't say the whole household and then name only the man that lives there. The household is constituted of men, women, and children. But there's a bit of confusion that starts in verse 15. Let's go down to verse 15 and read that. "And he said to the people," that's God talking to the people through Moses, "Be ready for the 3rd day. Do not go near a woman." Well, this is confusing to those who believe the commandments do not pertain to women, and they use this verse to stake their claim because they say that that verse right there is only for men. Only a man can, not go near a woman. But I'm going to have to tell you something. For a man to not go near a woman requires the participation of the woman. I'm sorry, guys. A man not going near a woman can't be done by himself. It requires the two of them. So this verse includes women by default. Might I say by common sense? So the commandments are for men, women, and children. Now, of course, we all know that not all of the commandments apply to us personally. There are some commandments that say your men shall or your males shall do whatever it is. And there are some commandments that say your priests shall do these things. And then there are some commandments that say your women shall do this. And there are commandments for children, and there are commandments even for the land. So therefore, the commandments apply to everyone depending upon their providential situation, whether they are men, women, children, priests, or land. But even if we say that a commandment doesn't apply to us, it doesn't mean that that is something we can ignore, that we don't need to know about, or that if something happens and, like we change from being a child to being an adult, that, we can ignore all that stuff that we learned when we were children. No, we have to use some common sense about this. Let's continue in verse 4. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. You see, that's what a man says. If you will do what I need done, if you will keep covenant with me, then I will treasure you above all other women, for this particular house is mine, right? So the treasured possession is a reference to making a wife. Another word for that is a nation, as it says in the next verse, verse 6. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and sat before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. Now it says here he called the elders of the people. But in verse 8 it said, all the people answered together. That's all the men, all the women, and all the children. And they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. You see,